When the United States fired off Tomahawk missiles at a military airfield, not everybody liked it. Not everybody agreed with it, of course. It was a contentious, controversial move, and it makes people like Ann Coulter deeply concerned about the direction of the country with President Trump.
It's been interesting watching so many of these generals, straight out of Dr. Strangelove, pushing for war with Syria, war with Russia, war with North Korea. I thought General Mattis's statement, the Secretary of Defense, was fantastic yesterday, and that seemed to be returning to the Trump policy on the campaign, which is, I mean, how many times did he have to say it? He's not just he's not running to be president of the world, but president of America. He put our interests first. And, yeah, it's very hard to explain this Syrian attack. It is certainly not a vital national security interest. We generally don't, at least conservatives don't, support rushing around the world for humanitarian reasons.
Right.
And for that region of the world, Assad is one of the better leaders.
That's Ann last night on the Fox News Channel's Tucker Carlson show. I saw Pat Buchanan last night, and she's hardly a never-Trumper. I mean, she's not a never-Trumper. She's an enthusiastic President Trump supporter. I saw Pat Buchanan on Lou Dobbs Tonight last night, a little bit before I appeared, to talk about the United Airlines stuff. Of course, Pat has been a senior advisor to 3 American presidents. He's run for president twice. And this is a guy who's been in the trenches for many, many years, has a very impressive perspective. He's the author of The Greatest Comeback, How Richard Nixon Rose from Defeat to Create the New Majority. Welcome back to the show, Patrick J. Buchanan. Mr. Buchanan, how are you, sir?
Doing fine, Mike. How are you?
I'm good. Happy Easter. It been a while since we've caught up. It was good to see your face last night and hear your voice, and I said, let's see if we can get Pat on the radio show. It's been too long.
You know, the missus had taped my segment, and I was in there watching it, and who comes on after me?
My big fat face. Hey, tell me.
Slim down, my friend.
A little bit. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I'm doing my best. Pat, let's talk a little. First of all, before we get into Syria and listen, you're an America First guy. You always have been, and it's a big reason why Donald Trump got elected. There's no question in my mind. So let's first start with big picture overall as I start going around the country with some of my radio colleagues in the 100 Days of Trump tour. Tell me about the first couple of months of the Trump presidency from your perspective. Overall, big picture, how has he been doing, and what are your thoughts about the Trump administration thus far?
Well, it's a mixed picture, but you're right. I was very supportive of Trump from the day he came down that elevator and took the positions he did on America First and nationalism and economic trade and securing the border, and he was the one that did these things, and he won a good victory, and I really applauded it. It was delighted election night, and there's a lot of things he's done well. The Gorsuch thing is particularly good. There's been deregulation decisions. He's appointed some good folks to the domestic cabinet, even in the foreign policy area where I might disagree with those folks on their wars they got us into.
And, of course, the Supreme Court Justice.
Yeah, that's Gorsuch was outstanding, yeah. So he's done that, and there's some other things, but it clearly looks like when you saw that launch of that strike on Syria, what bothered me so much was not that the United States, that the Syrians did not deserve it, but that he's taken a first step, and if he puts another foot into Syria, he will never get out, and we will never get out of the Middle East, and it will consume his presidency. Mm-hmm. And he's put the ball in the court of the others who are going to see if they have to make some kind of response.
It was a very interesting thing to see the sort of strange bedfellows of the liberal media, even CNN, MSNBC, sort of praising the decision. As you put,
many of them they despise the Russians.
Right.
They're Russophobes. They want to get in Putin's face, which I have no desire to do, and they cannot get enough of these Middle East wars.
Right.
And these wars brought down our party in 2006, and it brought down, I think, the Republican Party in 2008, and you got Barack Obama. And somebody's got to tell me how we're going to get out of the Middle East when we're getting in deeper and deeper under President Trump.
So what do you say to the argument, Pat, that when you use chemical weapons, you cross every line imaginable? I appreciate the argument that there's no vital national interest, but then, of course, if our soldiers wind up being the victim, and there are troops in Syria, we have a presence, of course, in the Middle East. What happens if our soldiers wind up getting gassed by chemical weapons used by somebody like Bashar al-Assad?
Bashar al-Assad uses chemical weapons on American troops in Syria fighting ISIS. You attack Damascus.
Mm-hmm.
The United States does. But what I think we should have done is Assad and the others and the Russians said they didn't do it. What we should have done is say we have the proof and we demand access to that air base, and we will tell you where the sarin gas is kept, and we will go in and find it and prove it. And then you go back to the Security Council and impose sanctions on Syria if you've proven it.
Right.
So, but there was no need. The point of this is, when he made that strike, what you do is it's the first move in basically deep into a civil war in which we don't want to get involved. But you're almost certain, I think, everybody's applauding it now, especially McCain and the neocons, but we're almost certain to get some kind of response, and then we're going to have to respond back.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you stay out of the Syrian civil war if that happens?
I continue to see Senator McCain and Senator Lindsey Graham and others, vilify Russia as our mortal enemy, and I keep wondering, well, what's the end game? Do you want to? I mean, honestly, and I'm not trying to be a smart aleck here, and this isn't even rhetorical. Do they want a war with Russia?
Exactly. I mean, this is a nuclear. I mean, Russia is an enormously powerful nation in terms of nuclear weapons. And in terms of its strength inside that gigantic landmass, which is twice the size of the United States. And all during my lifetime, I've worked for presidents who have realized that and have said we've got to get along with these people,
right,
and in order to preserve our own security and liberty and freedom and draw our red lines and find out what they need and what we need and to negotiate with them. And you get McCain and Lindsey Graham, and they're all elated when you get into Putin's face.
Right.
What is the end game of that? You're exactly right, Mike.
So what should the end game be now going forward? Do you think President Trump needs to reconsider our presence and say, listen, as you write, if after Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, we don't want America in another Mideast war, we got to stop this now? Well,
this is the point that I've argued. We started our magazine, The American Conservative, to keep George W. Bush from going to war in Iraq. We said, when you go in there, you're going to find out over the next hill we're going to run into all the imperialists that came before us, the Brits and the Russians and all the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And we went into it. But the problem is getting out of it is not easy. If we move out of Afghanistan, my guess is, Mike, and probably the opinion of most observers, that will go down. It will return to the custody of the Taliban.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those gals we put into schools and a lot of the people that worked with us will wind up with the same results as the South Vietnamese and the Cambodians who were with us until things went south in 1975 after we left in 1973.
Tell me about your book next month, Nixon's White House Wars, the battles that made and broke a president and divided America forever.
Well, it was both a pleasure and a pain to write, I'll tell you, because of how it all ended.
Right.
But it's about there's about 20 chapters. The last 4 are on Watergate, or 4 of the last 5. And it's about all the battles in which I was involved, from the great silent majority speech to the Agnew speeches attacking the media, the beginnings of those wars, Mike, and my role in the Ellsberg operation where they wanted me to head up the plumbers, and my suggestion to the old man that he might be better off if he went downstairs and burned those tapes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm fascinated by your perspective on what's happening today compared to Richard Nixon and Watergate and the tapes and all of that. When you understand what's happening with the FISA court and Trump tweeting that, I'm being surveilled, the campaign, this is awful. It seems very clear that a sitting president was indeed spying on using the FBI and the Justice Department on his political opponent, namely the Trump campaign. This revelation about Carter Page this week, how does all of that compare to what you lived through Watergate?
Well, there are some similarities, but I will say this is far more sophisticated. What we had is 5 guys went into the Democratic National Committee. Nixon didn't know about it, but he mistakenly, tried to get the guys funds for their lawyers and the rest of it, and didn't tell the truth about it. Here you're using the most sophisticated weaponry, if you will, intelligence weaponry of the U.S. government.
Right.
Intercept phone calls, transcribe those phone calls, then unmask the individuals who have been mentioned or who have been talking on those phone calls, give those in to Susan Rice, and then spread them, have on Obama's order, spread them all to the department so they're sure to leak, and all these IEDs will go off in the early days of the Trump administration.
Right.
And that's what's been happening. Now, if those dots are connected, and some of them are beginning to be connected, this is a far worse thing than anything the amateurs at the committee to reelect the president did.
Yeah, that's what it just seems to be such a mess. And I try to remove my partisanship from it. And I say, wait a minute, we've got people who initially said on the left, if a presidential administration was actually using surveillance tools from the Justice Department or the FBI to spy on campaign officials for Donald Trump, that's a horrific circumstance, and it appears to be true. And of course, the media gives a big fat yawn over this week.
Well, let me tell you, LBJ, the Democratic Convention in Atlantic City in '64, Deke DeLoach of the FBI, I went up there with 50 agents, and they were spying on such national security risks as Martin Luther King, James Farmer, and Fannie Lou Hamer.
That's right.
They bugged. Nixon thinks they bugged the plane. I think they did bug Agnew's plane when we were going out there. I mean, I went into Nixon's office when I first went to work for him. I was about 27 years old, and I find some guys feeling around in the pillows.
Wow, that's amazing.
I said, what's going on here? This is the vice president's office.
Wow.
And so Rose told me, I got to clean. He's having a big meeting that afternoon. We got to clean it for bugs.
Wow, unbelievable. Well, I can't wait to read the book. I hope everybody gets it. Nixon's White House Wars. Let me just in closing, and I'm so glad to catch up with you, Pat. A lot of my listeners say we supported Trump. We're pulling for him. We want him to succeed. There's a very mighty force that's trying to take him down, that is going to fight him every step of the way. You think he's going to be okay? You think this administration is going to thrive and going to soar, or are they going to be facing this kind of obstruction and just divisiveness throughout?
I think it's going to be what we've seen the first 80, 90 days. I think it's going to be the same all the way through. There's no question he's getting a far better press now because of what happened in the past week with the attack on Syria and the rest of it. But the truth is, look, I was for Trump. I very much hope he succeeds. I am, as I wrote in that column. I desperately do not want to see my country get into another war in the Middle East from which we can't extricate ourselves and have all those wounded warriors starting back and all the caskets coming back to Dover, I'll tell you. But I'm still with him, and I retain hope, and I think folks ought to stick by him, but I think it remind him of what what he had said during the campaign, too.
Hope springs eternal. He is risen. All right. Happy Easter, Pat. It's great to catch up with you. Best of luck with
Easter, my friend.
I'll talk to you soon. God bless. There's Pat Buchanan spending a few minutes with us.